Rancher lived alone for years, until 10 Apache appeared at his door. Wild West stories on the far edge of a desert world called Arroyo Prime, where twin suns burned the sky in pale gold and red. A rancher lived alone on land that stretched farther than most people could see. His name was Daniel Hale, though few people used it anymore. In the nearby settlement, they simply called him the Quiet Rancher. He rarely spoke, rarely visited town, and never stayed long when he did. Years earlier, settlers had arrived on Arroyo Prime hoping to build a new frontier like the old west of Earth. They raised cattle, built wooden towns, and rode across open plains under alien stars. Daniel had been one of the first. Back then, he had a partner, friends, and plans for a future filled with growth. But something had changed. Conflicts, losses, and hard seasons had slowly taken people away from him, until only the ranch remained. His home sat near a canyon carved by ancient winds. Solar panels shimmered beside a traditional wooden barn. Mechanical fences hummed quietly, keeping predators away from the bioengineered cattle that grazed on strange blue grass. Daniel worked every day from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, guiding the herd, and maintaining old machines that had outlived their original owners. He preferred silence. Silence did not judge. Silence did not remind him of what was gone. One evening, as the red sun began to sink behind distant mesas, Daniel noticed dust rising on the horizon. At first, he assumed it was a storm. Dust storms were common here, rolling across the plains without warning. But this dust moved differently, slower, steady, deliberate. He reached for his long rifle, leaning against the porch rail. Years of living alone had taught him never to ignore signs like this. The shapes came into view slowly. Riders, 10 of them. They rode on horseback, not speed bikes or cargo vehicles like most settlers used. The sight alone told Daniel these were not ordinary travelers. As they approached closer, he saw their clothing, long coats, leather decorated with patterns, beads reflecting sunlight, and pieces of advanced gear integrated into traditional designs. Their presence felt both ancient and futuristic at once. Apache descendants. Daniel had heard stories about them. Generations ago, a group from Earth had left to preserve their traditions far from crowded planets. They had settled on Arroyo Prime long before most colonists arrived. Some settlers respected them, others feared or misunderstood them. The riders slowed as they reached the edge of his property. The leader raised one hand, signaling peace. Daniel did not lower his rifle. They stopped several yards away. Dust settled around them. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The leader stepped forward. He was older, his face marked by years and wisdom, his eyes calm but alert. "We ask for shelter," he said quietly. His voice carried across the dry air without force. Daniel said nothing. Behind the leader, Daniel noticed others, not only warriors but elders and 2 young children riding behind adults. Their expressions were tired. One of the horses limped slightly. "We will not stay long," the leader continued. "Only until morning." Daniel's grip tightened on the rifle. Memories of past conflicts flickered in his mind. Settlers and tribal groups had clashed before, often because of misunderstandings or outside forces pushing them against each other. He had learned that trouble followed people who traveled in groups. "This land is private," Daniel said finally. His voice sounded rough from disuse. The leader nodded slowly. "We know, that is why we ask." Daniel studied them carefully. Their equipment showed signs of recent damage. One rider carried a wrapped arm. Another watched the horizon constantly, as if expecting pursuit. "What happened?" Daniel asked. "Our home was taken," the leader replied. "Machines came first, then corporate enforcers. They claimed the land beneath our village held valuable minerals." Daniel felt a familiar anger stir. Mining corporations had been expanding lately, pushing deeper into frontier territories. Many settlers feared losing their land next. "They destroyed everything?" Daniel asked. The leader's gaze lowered briefly. "Everything that could not be moved." Silence returned. The wind moved through dry grass around them. Daniel wanted to say no. Letting strangers stay meant risk. If someone was chasing them, his ranch would become a target. He had survived alone by avoiding other people's problems. But then one of the children shifted nervously on the horse, eyes wide with exhaustion. The sight struck him harder than he expected. He remembered another time, another child laughing on this land long ago. Daniel lowered the rifle slightly. "One night," he said at last. "You leave at sunrise." Relief flickered across several faces, though they remained respectful. The leader inclined his head in thanks. They moved quietly into the ranch yard. Horses were watered. Blankets were spread near the barn. Nobody acted as if they owned the place. They behaved like guests aware they were not fully welcome. Daniel watched everything from the porch. As darkness settled, one of the elders approached him slowly, carrying a small tool. Without asking, the elder walked toward the water filtration unit beside the house. Daniel tensed, but the elder simply examined a loose panel. "It is damaged," the elder said gently. "May I fix it?" Daniel hesitated. That unit had been malfunctioning for weeks. "Do what you want," he muttered. Within minutes, the elder adjusted something inside. The machine hummed differently, smoother than before. Daniel felt a strange mix of surprise and gratitude, but said nothing. Later, as everyone gathered around a small cooking fire, the leader approached again. "My name is Atza," he said. "We will not bring trouble to your home." Daniel nodded slightly. "Daniel!" The firelight reflected in their eyes as they sat across from each other. They did not talk much, but the silence felt different now, less tense. During the night, Daniel remained awake longer than usual. He noticed the warriors taking turns watching the horizon. They were not careless. They protected their people. Just before dawn, a faint mechanical sound echoed in the sky. Daniel stepped outside immediately. A drone passed overhead, scanning slowly. It did not stop, but its presence meant something. Someone was searching. Daniel looked toward the Apache camp. Several warriors had already seen it. Their faces hardened. Trouble was closer than he had expected. The rancher stood quietly as the first light of sunrise spread across the land. He had planned to send them away at dawn, but now uncertainty pressed against him like a coming storm. For years, he had believed the safest path was to remain alone, untouched by the conflicts of others. But as he watched the tired group preparing to leave, elders helping children, warriors saddling horses without complaint, he felt the weight of a decision he had not yet made. The frontier had changed, and perhaps whether he wanted it or not, his quiet life was about to change with it. Morning light spread slowly across the plains of Arroyo Prime, turning the blue grass into waves of silver. Daniel stood near the fence line, watching the Apache group prepare to leave. The riders moved with quiet efficiency. Saddles were tightened, supplies packed, and the children helped onto horses with gentle care. Everything looked calm, but Daniel felt the tension beneath the surface. The drone from earlier still bothered him. It had not been a random patrol. Someone was searching. Atza, the Apache leader, approached him again. His expression was steady, but there was weariness behind his eyes. "We thank you for your kindness," Atza said. "We will move before the sun climbs high." Daniel nodded. He wanted to say something more, but the words did not come easily. Living alone for years had made conversations feel heavy. Before anyone could leave, a faint humming sound echoed from the sky again. Everyone froze. Another drone appeared, closer this time. Its metallic body glinted under the rising sun. Red scanning lights swept across the land like searching eyes. One of the warriors cursed quietly under his breath. "They have tracked us," Atza said softly. Daniel watched the drone carefully. It hovered above the far edge of his ranch, scanning the ground in slow circles. "If it marks this location," Daniel said, "they'll send more." Atza looked toward the riders. Some of them tightened their grips on weapons, but none acted recklessly. "We do not wish to bring danger to your home," Atza said. Daniel let out a slow breath. He had spent years avoiding trouble, building walls around himself. But the truth was clear now. Trouble had already arrived. "Move the horses into the canyon," he said finally. "There's a narrow path behind the barn, hard to see from above." The warriors hesitated, surprised by his offer. "You sure?" one of them asked. Daniel gave a small nod. "If you're leaving, you need time. That drone won't give you much." They moved quickly. The children were guided toward the hidden path. Daniel climbed onto the roof of his barn, carrying a small handheld device. He adjusted the frequency on an old signal jammer he had built years ago to confuse predators tracking collars. It wasn't designed for drones, but it might buy them a few minutes. He activated it. The air vibrated faintly. The drone's lights flickered, and it shifted slightly off course, scanning in wider circles instead of focusing on the ground. "Come on," Daniel muttered. Below, the Apache group disappeared into the canyon path one by one. After several tense moments, the drone turned away, drifting slowly toward the horizon. Daniel released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He climbed down from the roof and walked toward the canyon entrance. The riders had stopped there, waiting. Atza watched him carefully. "You did not have to help," the leader said. Daniel shrugged slightly. "Didn't want machines snooping around my land." But they both knew that wasn't the full truth. Instead of leaving, Atza gestured for the group to remain hidden. "The drone will return," he said, "and next time it may not come alone." Daniel leaned against the fence post, thinking. The corporation's reach was growing. If they were hunting the Apache group, they would eventually check nearby ranches. That meant his ranch was already at risk. "What exactly did you take from them?" Daniel asked. Atza shook his head. "Nothing, only our home stood above resources they wanted. That was enough." One of the younger warriors stepped forward. "They use machines to force people away." "No warnings, only orders." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had heard similar stories from other settlers in town. He led them back toward the ranch yard instead of toward the open plains. "You can't outrun drones forever," he said. "Better to stay hidden here for now." The Apache riders exchanged looks, surprised again. "You said we leave at sunrise," Atza reminded gently. Daniel nodded slowly. "Plans change." Throughout the day, they worked together to make the ranch less visible. Daniel showed them how to lower the solar panels into protective angles that reduced reflection. The warriors used small devices that projected camouflage fields over certain structures. Together, old ranching knowledge and tribal technology blended into something stronger. At first, conversations were short and careful, but as hours passed, the tension eased slightly. One of the children laughed when a ranch animal nudged him gently. The sound of laughter felt strange in Daniel's ears. It had been a long time since he heard it here. Later, while repairing a broken fence, Daniel noticed one of the warriors watching him closely. "You work alone every day?" the warrior asked. "Yes." "Why?" Daniel paused. He did not like answering questions about his past. "Because it's easier," he said finally. The warrior nodded but did not press further. As evening approached, a distant rumbling sound reached them, not thunder engines. Daniel climbed a small ridge and looked through his binoculars. 3 vehicles moved across the plains, kicking up dust, corporate enforcers. "They found the general area," he said when he returned. The group gathered quietly, their expressions serious. Atza spoke calmly. "We do not wish to fight on your land." Daniel considered this. Fighting here would risk everything he had built. But letting the corporation search freely would be worse. "They won't stop," he said. "If they think you're here, they'll scan every inch." He paused, then added, "And if they don't find you, they might decide my land looks valuable too." Atza studied him carefully. "Then our problems have become the same." Daniel nodded slowly. That night they sat around a small fire again, but this time the mood felt different. There was still caution, but also a growing understanding. Atza told stories about their journey from Earth generations ago, about preserving traditions while adapting to a new world. Daniel listened quietly. He had never known much about them beyond rumors. In return, he spoke briefly about the early days of the colony, long trails, building fences by hand, believing the frontier would remain free. The fire crackled between them. For the first time in years, Daniel did not feel completely alone. Suddenly, a sharp beep sounded from one of the warriors' devices. Incoming signal. Atza checked the screen, his expression tightening. "More drones," he said, "and ground units approaching from the west." Daniel stood slowly. The moment he had tried to avoid was here. He looked at the group, tired but strong, protective of each other, refusing to abandon their dignity. "All right," he said quietly. "If they want to search this ranch, they're going to have a hard time doing it." The warriors looked at him with new respect. Daniel picked up his hat and settled it firmly on his head. For years, he had lived without purpose beyond survival. Now, as the lights of approaching vehicles flickered in the distance, he felt something awaken inside him, not anger but determination. This was his land. And he would not let anyone take it without a fight. Night settled slowly across Arroyo Prime, covering the plains in deep blue shadows. The ranch felt different now. What had once been a quiet, lonely place had become a small stronghold filled with silent movement and careful preparation. Daniel stood near the barn, watching the distant lights grow brighter on the horizon. The corporate vehicles were still far away, but they were coming directly toward the ranch. There was no doubt anymore. Atza approached quietly. "They move with confidence," he said. "They believe they already know where we are." Daniel nodded. "That's how they operate. They pressure first, then search later." Around them, the Apache warriors prepared without panic. Some adjusted cloaking devices along the fence line, creating small distortions that blended structures into the surrounding terrain. Others guided the horses into hidden spaces near the canyon wall. Daniel had not expected to work alongside strangers like this again, yet their movements felt natural, like a well-trained team. "We don't need a big fight," Daniel said. "Just enough to make them think this place isn't worth the trouble." Atza listened carefully. "What do you suggest?" Daniel pointed toward a narrow stretch of land between two rocky ridges. "That's the only easy approach for vehicles. If we control that area, we control how close they get." The Apache warriors exchanged quick glances. One of them smiled slightly. "A trap," he said. Daniel allowed himself a faint grin. "A warning." They moved into action. Old ranch tools became part of their defense. Motion sensors were repositioned. Small explosive charges, normally used to break rocks for irrigation, were placed carefully under loose ground, designed to create loud bursts and clouds of dust rather than harm. Apache technology added another layer, creating false heat signatures in distant areas to confuse scanning systems. The plan was simple: make the ranch look unpredictable and dangerous enough that the corporation would hesitate. As the night deepened, the vehicles finally reached the outer boundary of the ranch. Bright lights cut through the darkness. Loudspeakers crackled. "This property is under investigation by Frontier Resource Authority," a mechanical voice announced. "All occupants step forward for identification." Daniel stepped out alone, walking slowly toward the lights. He wore his long coat and hat, his posture calm but firm. Behind him, hidden in shadows, the Apache warriors watched silently. A tall figure climbed out of one of the vehicles, a corporate enforcer wearing armored gear. His helmet visor reflected the ranch lights. "You Daniel Hale?" the enforcer asked. "Depends who's asking," Daniel replied. The enforcer ignored the tone. "We are searching for fugitives who may have passed through this area. You will allow us to scan your property." Daniel crossed his arms. "Got a legal warrant?" The enforcer paused slightly. "We operate under corporate authority." "This ain't corporate land," Daniel said quietly. "It's mine." Tension hung in the air. The enforcer signaled to another guard who began activating a drone. Daniel glanced back briefly, giving a small signal with his hand. Moments later, a loud explosion echoed from the canyon side, a controlled blast sending dust high into the air. The corporate guards turned immediately, startled. "What was that?" one shouted. Another explosion followed, farther away, then flickering lights appeared in the distance as false heat signatures activated. "Multiple targets detected," a guard yelled, checking his scanner. The enforcer's confidence wavered. Daniel kept his expression neutral. "Told you," he said calmly. "Land's unstable. You don't want heavy machines running around here at night." The drone lifted into the air but began spinning slightly as Daniel's old jammer interfered with its signals. Its scanning beams flickered unpredictably. The Apache warriors remained hidden, their cloaking devices blending them into darkness. Frustration showed in the enforcer's posture. "We will return with full authorization," he said finally. Daniel nodded slowly. "You do that." The vehicles hesitated, engines rumbling, then slowly turned away, retreating toward the plains. Daniel waited until the lights disappeared before relaxing his shoulders. One by one, the Apache warriors stepped out of hiding. Atza approached him, a faint smile on his face. "You chose wisdom over violence," he said. Daniel shrugged. "Violence brings more trouble." The group returned to the ranch yard, tension slowly fading. For the first time since the corporation arrived, there was a sense of victory, small but meaningful. One of the children laughed quietly, imitating the confused movements of the malfunctioning drone. The sound made several warriors smile. Daniel sat near the fire, staring into the flames. "You bought us time," Atza said. "Not enough," Daniel replied. "They'll come back stronger." "Probably with legal orders next time," Atza nodded. "Then we must prepare for something bigger." Silence settled between them. After a while, Daniel spoke again. "I lived alone because I thought that was safer," he said quietly. "But maybe being alone just makes you easier to push around." Atza looked at him with understanding. "Strength grows when people stand together," he said. The words stayed with Daniel long after the fire burned low. Later that night, as he walked along the fence line, he noticed something new inside himself, a sense of responsibility not only for his ranch, but for the people now sharing it. He realized he did not want to return to the empty silence that had filled his life before. The frontier had changed, and so had he. As dawn began to break again over the plains, Daniel watched the horizon carefully. The corporation would return, that was certain. But this time he would not face them alone. And for the first time in years, the thought did not feel heavy. It felt right. Morning arrived quietly, but Daniel knew peace would not last long. The sky above Arroyo Prime stretched wide and clear, colored with pale gold from the rising suns. The ranch looked calm again, almost normal, yet everyone understood that the corporation would return, and next time they would not leave easily. Daniel stood near the fence, watching the horizon through his binoculars. The plains were empty for now, but tension remained in the air like a coming storm. Behind him, the Apache group prepared for the day. Some repaired equipment, others checked horses and supplies. The children played carefully near the barn, their laughter soft but hopeful. The sound felt strange to Daniel, but not unwelcome. Atza walked toward him, carrying a small device. "We intercepted a signal last night," he said. "They plan to come back with legal authority and more forces." Daniel lowered the binoculars slowly. He had expected this. "They'll try to claim the land officially," he said. "Make it look lawful." Atza nodded. "Yes, they believe settlers will not resist if everything appears legal." Daniel thought for a long moment. Fighting again would only delay the problem. The corporation had resources, influence, and endless machines. A direct battle could not be the final answer. "We need something stronger than guns," he said finally. Atza watched him carefully. "What do you have in mind?" Daniel turned toward the distant town. "Truth," he said. Later that day, Daniel saddled his horse. The Apache warriors gathered near the gate, curious about his decision. "I'm going into town," he told them. "If they want to play by rules, we show them the real rules." Atza stepped forward. "You will go alone?" Daniel nodded. "They expect that, and sometimes one person walking calmly causes more change than 10 warriors riding to battle." Atza placed a hand over his chest in respect. "We will prepare here." Daniel rode across the plains, dust rising behind him. The town of Red Mesa appeared slowly, wooden buildings standing under the open sky, people moving through the streets with quiet purpose. As he entered, conversation slowed. Many settlers recognized him but rarely saw him stay long. He rode directly toward the administrative building, a structure half wood, half metal, symbolizing the mix of old frontier life and modern systems. Inside, local officials looked up in surprise. "Daniel Hale?" one asked. "What brings you here?" Daniel removed his hat slowly. "Corporations trying to take land again," he said. "Not just Apache land, all of ours." Some people exchanged worried looks. "They have legal rights," another official said carefully. "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but not the way they're doing it." He placed a small data device on the table. It contained recordings gathered by Apache tech specialists, evidence of illegal actions, forced removals, and unauthorized drone surveillance. "These are violations of settlement charter laws," Daniel said. "They can't claim land without proper consent." The officials watched the recordings silently. Expressions changed from uncertainty to concern. Word spread quickly through town. Ranchers, traders, and settlers gathered outside, listening as details emerged. Many had feared the corporation but believed resistance was useless. Now they realized they were not alone. A group of ranchers approached Daniel. "They came to my land last month," one said. "Said they were surveying. They told me I'd need to relocate next year," another added. Anger began to replace fear. Together, they formed a plan. Instead of fighting alone, they would stand publicly against the corporation. When corporate vehicles arrived later that day, they found not just one rancher waiting, but a gathering of settlers standing beside local officials. The corporate enforcer stepped forward again, confident at first. "We are here to execute authorized land acquisition," he announced. The town leader raised a hand calmly. "You may want to review this evidence first," she said, presenting the data. The enforcer watched the recordings, his posture stiffening slightly. "These claims are under review," he said quickly. "And until review is complete," the town leader replied firmly, "you are not permitted to continue operations here." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. The corporation had expected isolation and silence, not unity. Faced with legal resistance and public attention, the enforcer signaled his team to withdraw temporarily. Daniel watched as the vehicles turned away once more. This time, victory felt different, not just survival, but change. He returned to the ranch by sunset. The Apache group waited near the gate, eyes searching his face for news. "They pulled back," Daniel said simply. Relief spread through the group. Atza stepped forward, gratitude clear in his expression. "You protected more than our people today," he said. Daniel shrugged slightly. "Turns out people listen when someone finally speaks up." Over the following days, something new began to grow. Settlers visited the ranch openly, offering support and trade. Apache warriors helped repair neighboring fences. Children from both groups played together, curiosity replacing distance. The ranch no longer felt isolated. One evening, Daniel sat on the porch watching the horizon. Horses moved slowly across the fields, and smoke from cooking fires rose into the sky. Atza joined him quietly. "You have changed," Atza said gently. Daniel considered this. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I just remembered who I was before I decided being alone was easier." They watched the sunset together, comfortable in silence. The frontier would always hold challenges. Corporations might return. Hard days would come again, but Daniel understood something new now. Strength did not come from isolation. It came from standing beside others, protecting what mattered and choosing connection even after loss. As night settled over Arroyo Prime, laughter echoed across the ranch, a sound that once felt impossible here. And for the first time in many years, Daniel Hale did not feel like a man surviving on the edge of the world. He felt like he belonged to it again.